It is the dawn of the 2nd century for America's national parks. Welcome to Acadia National Park at its 100-year anniversary. It's a place of amazing natural beauty that belongs to all Americans. But Acadia is much more than beautiful scenery. The lens of science can enrich a park experience and help us understand how to manage the park wisely.
Oh, that's good too.
Looking more closely with the benefit of modern science, what do you see?
I see amazing wildlife and ecosystems critical for their survival. A remarkable array of fish and marine creatures.
I see threats from industrial pollution
and obstructive migration pathways.
A place for boating and fishing.
A water supply.
Our drinking water.
I see stunning geology created by massive glaciers over 300 million years.
I see a special place that has been largely protected from development during a century of vast economic expansion.
I see tourism, economic development, and jobs.
I see maintenance and infrastructure needs.
I see 750,000 visitors each year to Cadillac Mountain.
I see clear vistas in the cosmos, a sky filled with billions of stars.
A place of important history, a homeland for Native Americans.
Well, I see a playground for children,
A classroom for students.
A place that inspires art.
I see the healing power of nature. Many different perspectives can enhance park experiences. The perspective of science can be particularly important in helping public agencies and private citizens protect our parks for future generations. Our journey to explore science beyond Acadia's beautiful scenery begins here. This marsh, like all of Acadia, has been protected for 100 years, far from the urban and industrial world. It is a critical habitat for many species, including dragonflies. Masters of flight, voracious predators, colorful, prehistoric. These amazing creatures spend the first years of their lives in the water. It is this larval phase which we will examine more closely to see what hidden secrets of the marsh can be revealed.
Most of the creatures in here are dragonfly nymphs of various families. There are a few other creatures that aren't dragonflies in here. This is a water scorpion up here. So there are all kinds of really neat creatures that we may find today. We're here in Acadia National Park with a 4th grade class. We are collecting dragonfly nymphs, the larval aquatic phase of dragonflies, as part of the nationwide Dragonfly Mercury project. Let's look and see. That project is looking at using dragonfly nymphs as bioindicators for the presence of mercury in our watersheds.
Oh, you found 2 frogs?
The tail end there.
I don't know what it is, but it's gross.
So there are about 45 different national parks all across the country that are collecting dragonfly nymphs, some of them with school kids like we are today, some with the general public, all as citizen science in the service of learning about how the levels of pollution of mercury in particular are, with parks as our sampling sites.
The main sources of mercury in our atmosphere are coal-fired power plants and waste incineration. Atmospheric mercury from these sources is carried back to Earth in precipitation and deposited in water, where bacteria convert it to toxic methylmercury. In this form, it accumulates in living organisms such as mammals and fish, with greater concentrations at higher levels of the food chain.
Someone's in that.
This kind of hands-on experience for the kids is really what inspires them to connect directly to the resource. So they're having fun, but they're learning at the same time.
Beyond that, projects of this kind contribute to science-based stewardship policies in national parks.
Oh, wow! I got a really big leech!
Holy crap! Get that thing away from me!
Get that thing away! Big leech!
Yes, it is.
Holy mackerel!
You want to hold it?
She can put it in the actually, yeah. Oh no, that will suck out your blood! Ew, no! Oh, it is now. Oh, what are you doing? It's gonna suck your blood out! Are you crazy? Whoa. You monster! You're crazy!
Put it back in the net and bring it to your box.
inspiring that kind of a direct experience where they're just fully engaged and excited about the natural world is our goal, and it seems like that's been a very successful endeavor with this project.
What class are you here for?
Science.
Where's your textbook?
We're not in class. This is life science. This is probably the best time I've ever had in science in my life. I probably won't miss the lesson. I really like this.
The Dragonfly Mercury project has been ongoing since 2011 across the country. Data collected is showing us that we must be highly vigilant about the unintended impact of industrial contaminants. Mercury emission controls put in place via the Clean Air Act of 1990 have significantly reduced toxic pollution. Yet health hazards still exist in places even as protected as Acadia National Park.
There's another one though over here. Maybe you're right. Maybe that is right.
I am foggy!
Our journey continues with social science issues at the top of iconic Cadillac Mountain, where sunrise first greets the United States. Every year, more than 750,000 people visit the summit of Cadillac Mountain. Traffic and people management benefits from scientific analysis and planning to create great visitor experiences while protecting natural resources on the summit. Ranger Charlie Jacoby is a resource specialist who focuses on visitor use management in Acadia. His career as a ranger was inspired in part by visits to 16 national parks immediately after college graduation.
Cadillac Mountain is where all our visitor use management issues are in some ways best illustrated. We can have as many as 100 cars an hour coming up Cadillac Mountain for the bulk of the day. And the parking lot is overflowing at sunrise, and then it's steady right through until sunset. And sunset is really the crunch time when there's well over 200 cars an hour, approaching 300 cars an hour. If we want to protect and preserve those visitor experiences that folks are looking for when they come here, we need to know how they're experiencing the park. So the way to do that is to go out and ask them.
An important resource available to park staff is a local Friends group. Friends of Acadia is a nonprofit citizen stewardship organization that supports Acadia National Park and surrounding communities.
Youth engagement and youth involvement is a big part of what Friends of Acadia is helping the park with these days.
One such program is called Ridge Runners. Summer interns focused on education, research, and infrastructure projects.
This is actually my second year working in Acadia. According to actual Mainers, I'm not a real Mainer. I moved to Bar Harbor when I was 7, and I've been here ever since.
It's pretty much a dream job in that you get to be outside and welcoming people to the park.
Like the Ridge Runners, Summit Stewards provide assistance on Cadillac Mountain.
The best part about being a Summit Steward is that we get to wear so many different hats. We get to do visitor education, collect data, crunch numbers.
Natural and historic resources can be threatened in so many ways because we have so many users. Leave No Trace education is a way of bringing everyone together and saying, let's see what we can do to keep this place sustainable for future generations.
We have natural exclosures that have ropes around them. We ask people to stay out of them so that it allows the plants a chance to rebound.
It's all about the 7 Leave No Trace principles. If everybody could follow those principles here in the park, everyone would have a much better experience.
Trail maintenance includes maintaining our Bates cairns, which are a historic resource, and directional aid. They came about because we only have like a very thin layer of soil after the glaciers came through.
Rock graffiti is when people decide to make their own different rock sculptures, which can actually mislead hikers and be a real problem.
What's interesting for me about this job is that it's a lot about balancing the protection of the resource up here and the environment with protecting the visitor experience. And I think not only can the natural environment deteriorate up here if it isn't managed properly, but the visitor experience will sort of deteriorate as well. Managing the summit will help to balance those two interests.
I grew up here. I consider it my backyard. I absolutely love it, and I want other people after me to be able to experience the same things I have.
Acadia and other national parks belong to all Americans. Each visitor and every visit can make a difference in preserving and protecting parks. An important principle for all is to leave no trace of your visit. Science-based stewardship in national parks is enhanced via partnerships with education and research organizations, including a network of so-called research learning centers across the country.
One of the most amazing things about the Research Learning Centers is the ability to leverage experiences. So while I may not be a scientist, I can find a scientist and put them together with a classroom. And when they come together and they work together, the synergy of that relationship is much bigger than anything I could do as a park ranger.
The resident research learning center at Acadia National Park is Schoodic Institute, an independent nonprofit organization located on the Schoodic Peninsula section of the park. The institute is committed to guiding present and future generations to greater understanding and appreciation of Acadia National Park. Mark Berry leads Schoodic Institute. An early experience in Yellowstone National Park helped him understand the power of parks to inspire visitors about nature, and inspired Mark to pursue a career in science, education, and conservation.
This is the largest research learning center in that network, but all of them share an aspect of being a public-private partnership that attracts important research and connects it to education and to resource management.
The coming and going of tides creates a special shoreline ecosystem that is teeming with life and supportive of ocean health. When the massive 10-foot high tides at Acadia National Park recede, vast intertidal zones at low tide can become fascinating classrooms for learning about creatures there. We followed Ranger Kate Petrie to explore intertidal ecosystems with students from New Jersey studying at the Schoodic Institute. Natural landscapes inspired her interest in parks at an early age, and she's enthusiastic about sharing these experiences.
Well, this morning we brought students out into the intertidal zone to look at the creatures that live between high and low tide and learn about the zonation from the black spray zone down through brown algae and rockweeds into the red algae zone, and to do a little bit of a population survey, looking at the different species that thrive at different depths. When we first got out there, they almost seemed content to sit on the rocks and watch me do the tide pooling for them. And I'm like, that's not gonna wash, guys. You need to get out here in it. And as soon as I gave them permission to do that, get their shoes wet, you see the excitement start to grow, and you start to hear them say things to each other. And may not be using scientific terms, but the excitement is really, lighting them up, and they're getting more into it.
Oh, that is so cool. That's like her fifth crab.
They have a lot of questions about how things survive, the names of different organisms, and what they eat, and they start to get into the adaptations and even the community structure in some cases. Talking a little bit about what scientists monitor, and posing questions like, how many barnacles are there on the Maine coast? And start talking about random sampling and research methods. We do spend a good deal of time giving them free time so that they can find creatures in the tide pools. For example, today's group's high school students who had never had the opportunity to be on a rocky shore and go tide pooling.
A crab with tribal print. He's so cute. He's just like, oh my God, Mia! Oh my God.
Oh, that one's really cool.
Isn't he sick?
They were quite impressed with some of the blue mussels and how they hang on to the rocks even, with their byssal threads and the way that they attach with an epoxy that solidifies underwater. Every year we have groups of kids who have never seen the ocean, even some Maine children who haven't seen the ocean.
Do you see that? Yeah.
And it's a chance to expose them to the diversity of resources that we have here so that they can appreciate the diversity of both national parks and the resources in their own backyard.
You'd be waist deep in water if you were still there.
And we were there before. We were
a little bit. We're like right there. We're like in the moment.
And all the tiny tide pools are gone too. That's really cool.
I think that it's easier to learn when you're actually doing it, because when you're in class it's like so boring and you can't focus. But this makes me want to, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think this is so much more interesting and it's so much more effective because we're actually able to handle everything and explore what we're learning about.
A real-world experience helps children engage on many levels and carries through for a lot longer than we would expect. I hear back from teachers who believe that some of the children have been changed forever by having an experience in the natural world.
Some important species of fish live their lives in both the ocean and fresh water. Salmon, striped bass, sturgeon, and others live most of their lives in the ocean, but return to freshwater to spawn, a migratory behavior that has evolved over millions of years. Human development such as dams and roadways can have a dramatic impact on these species by blocking migrations and destroying habitats. Modern science has helped us understand the impact of dams and water culverts on habitat damage and has led to effective ways to restore fish migratory pathways. The restoration of these pathways has far-reaching implications for other species, including birds which prey on migratory fish.
We've learned a lot in the last 10 years about obstacles to natural movement of fish upstreams. A good example of that would be culverts. And so we have a program to identify where the obstacles are and to remove those as quickly as we can to reestablish natural movement of fish.
At an 18th century dam near Acadia National Park, Ranger Bruce Connery discusses strategies for restoring migratory pathways.
So if you go out anywhere along the eastern seaboard, you'll find ways to get fish from the ocean into fresh water. And this is one of the various ways that actually uses a series of steps that comes up and makes an S-turn and then goes into a freshwater pond.
Periodic fish counts at these ladders are used to determine species abundance and trends.
The species that we count here are alewives. They're part of the herring family. This population had fallen to less than 1,000 fish. Last year it was over 35,000. So the efforts to help make the fish way better have actually resulted in fish increasing, and that's how we're recovering the population.
As scientific studies have created better understanding of the benefits of protecting important habitats, restoration projects have been undertaken across the country. The removal of 2 dams on the Penobscot River, Maine's largest watershed, helped to restore the habitat of endangered salmon and other species while providing other recreational and economic benefits.
Clear.
We traveled to Great Duck Island, adjacent to Acadia National Park, with students from the College of the Atlantic, led by Professor John Anderson. His decision to pursue a career in natural resource conservation was inspired by hearing as a child that California brown pelicans might become extinct. He discovered the power of scientific research in wildlife stewardship and takes great joy in seeing his students inspired by park experiences.
Most people who come to Acadia think about Acadia as being just one island, which is Mount Desert Island. What they don't realize is the park actually owns or has easements on well over 100 islands up and down the coast between Schoodic Peninsula and Penobscot Bay. And many of these islands are actually critically important habitat for nesting seabirds during the spring, summer, and into autumn. So we partner with Acadia National Park in both studying the species and landscapes of the park, and also in terms of working with the park in developing ways of informing the public of this really amazing natural resource that they have just immediately offshore. Great Duck Island is a nice example of the sort of collaborative work that we see here in Down East Maine. So we share the island with Nature Conservancy, State of Maine, and a private landholder. What we've been doing on Great Duck over the years is training generations of students in how to move around in seabird colonies, how to monitor nests up close and personal. So students train on Great Duck, and then they're in a position to really be of some use to the Park Service in getting detailed records of the birds on the park islands themselves. One of the students who's coming along this trip is Rachel Karash. She spent 2 summers out on Great Duck. Her real specialty is Leach's storm petrel. Leach's storm petrel nests underground in burrows. We think we've got about 5,000 pairs of Leach's storm petrels on the island. So Rachel's going to be checking on some of her nests that she mapped out this summer. And we expect we'll find at least a few chicks still, because we found chicks in the burrows as late as the end of November.
Got it.
shake. No? Hello! This is a petrel. Beaches storm petrel. Oh my cute. They have the tube nose there and their little web feet. Sometimes they're all torn up because they're pelagic, so they go way out to sea and the fish bite their feet. They eat algae, and if they're really stressed out, they'll puke it up. It's like this really nasty smelling reddish goop. Not much is published on them, so there's still a lot of questions that are unanswered. This one still has a lot of fluff.
The petrels only actually come in and out of their burrows way after dark, and so they're quite hard to study on the island. We see them a long way offshore. They may go as far as 100 miles offshore to go feed, but in order to avoid predators, they only come back to the island after dark. It's so important, both in terms of education and also just general understanding of nature, to actually get out and experience it firsthand. And so this is what Acadia gives us this wonderful gift of being able to do. I can take my students literally across the road and we're into this living laboratory where everything's happening. It's not in textbooks, it's not in video. When they ask me, what are we going to see today? I can honestly say, I don't know. And that's why it's science.
Our time with these students demonstrated the power of park experiences to fuel curiosity and the power of science to explore important stewardship issues.
Someone kept them going.
What's that? A popular part of many outdoor experiences is to socialize around campfires. Most visitors are well aware of forest fire dangers posed by campfires. A far less recognized danger is the prospect of invasive insect species in firewood brought to the park. Introduction of these exotic insects and exotic plants can cause very serious damage to park ecosystems. Ranger Judy Hazen-Connery is a natural resource program manager at Acadia who pays close attention to this important stewardship issue.
So I'm standing here at Sur de Mont, and this is an area that has a high percentage of ash trees. We marked all of the ash trees here in Sur de Mont with purple ribbons, and these trees are threatened by a small insect called the emerald ash borer, and they cause the death of all ash trees within 3 to 5 years. We're at really high risk for people bringing firewood from an area that already has emerald ash borer, and then maybe they don't burn all their wood, so they leave it at their campsite. The beetles emerge as adults, and then we would have it here. So we're trying to get the word out. Please leave your firewood at home. Don't worry, there's lots of firewood available for sale when you get here. Buy it where you're gonna burn it. Don't move it. If we can keep it out just long enough for the science to catch up with the invasion, we might actually have hope of saving our giant ash trees here at Acadia.
We travel with Ranger Judy to popular Jordan Pond House. En route, as we pass scenic marshes, we hear that visitors once enjoyed seeing beautiful flowers called purple loosestrife blooming across the landscape. But Ranger Judy tells us the ugly side of this story.
Acadia has about 900 species of native plants and then about another 200 species that are not native. And of those, about 30 are highly invasive and they move into natural landscapes, and they really represent a huge threat to Acadia's resources. In the mid-1980s, we identified purple loosestrife as being the most important of the exotic invasive plants to manage because it moves aggressively into wetlands. And we didn't want our wetlands, which are pristine, among the best in New England, to become monocultures of purple loosestrife. Even though it's beautiful, ecologically it's a disaster. We started managing that in 1988. And if you were to go into the park wetlands now, you would see hardly any purple loosestrife at all.
At Jordan Pond, Ranger Judy tells us the story of another exotic invasive plant, Oriental bittersweet, often used for decorations such as wreaths.
But what happens to those wreaths when they're done with them? They toss them out and birds spread those seeds and the berries, and they ended up here in this landscape. And it smothers the trees. This landscape was completely covered by Oriental bittersweet. So people would come to the Jordan Pond house and all they would see was these trailing vines that just covered everything. And so using a science-based integrated approach, we developed a management plan and started to implement it about 5 years ago. People that come here now have a chance to experience this important cultural landscape without it being covered by exotic plants.
And that's made out of birch bark too, see how hard?
Next, we explore a cultural stewardship program that is an important part of the Acadia experience.
All of these, that's a little tiny canoe. That's just a toy. It's a boat. Yeah, it's like a little tiny boat.
Science related to cultural resources, to archaeology, to history are as significant as natural sciences. Well, that is a birch bark wigwam.
And it informs the science of archaeology because it's that traditional ecological knowledge that connects the archaeological past, that science, to the living people today.
David Moses Bridges is a renowned Passamaquoddy artist, educator, and community activist who works with birch bark to create canoes, baskets, and wigwams in the traditional way. He is passionate about cultural traditions, and his work can be seen in museums across the country.
Wigwam is a Passamaquoddy way of saying a house, our dwelling. Wigwam is how we would pronounce it more specifically. This structure was originally built about 5 years ago. A good friend of mine, Barry Dana, a Penobscot friend of mine, actually put up the domed structure and covered it with bark, but the bark began deteriorating through public interaction over the years, and I started maintaining it for the park. Barry lives far away, I live right here. This year we wanted to tune it up very nice. I went out and I found these big, beautiful pieces of bark, and as you can see right over here, people are just fascinated. They've never seen one before. The Passamaquoddy people, the Wabanaki people, and the park wanted to create a living bridge between the indigenous people that are from here, to identify the fact to park visitors especially is that we're still here, that we exist right here on our ancestral homeland as we did for thousands of generations. For people to see that a structure like this can be pulled out of this forest quite easily with available materials and would house you for a winter. I think it's amazing for people to see that. It might give them a little bit more perspective on the land that they're on and the people that originally inhabited this land. The Abbey Museum is right up the hill here, and the Abbey Museum was established here in 1926 as the Museum of Stone Age Antiquities. People were getting used to the idea that indigenous people were gone, that if we weren't gone already, we will be pretty soon. So we better put it all in a museum. And for the park to promote that living bridge between indigenous cultures and bring that lesson to people of the world, I think that's very important. Our elders, our ancestors, they tried hard as they could to make the most of this environment that we live in, and they figured a few things out. They figured out how to survive here with our incredibly cold winter sometimes, incredible amounts of snow, periods of abundance when the fish come up our rivers, when the berries bloom, when the seabirds are laying their eggs, the moose, the deer, all of the fur-bearing animals that fed us and clothed us. I mean, these are all aspects of our ancestral homeland that are the reason that we're still here. We're attuned to the landscape that we're in because it sustains us. So I want the next generation to know about the land of our ancestors so that they can do their best throughout their lifetime to preserve it and also to teach the next generation and the next generation into perpetuity.
Okay, go ahead and start. Okay.
Stewardship of parks benefits immensely from scientific data about park conditions. An important mechanism used in parks for obtaining this data is citizen science participation via so-called bioblitzes. Every year in national parks, including Acadia, bioblitzes are organized to collect scientific data over a 24-hour period. Beyond the benefit of the data collected, these events provide an opportunity to cultivate citizen scientists and to engage the public in park appreciation.
We
are participating in the BioBlitz, which they do every year. We have a scientist from the Smithsonian who did a fantastic presentation last night. We learned a lot about flying wasps, which is what we're supposed to be collecting.
Basically, the goal is to collect as many Hymenoptera as possible within 24 hours. Hymenoptera are wasps, bees, and ants. And we're also actually doing myriapods, which is centipedes and millipedes.
So we're out here, we've learned to sweep with nets and do a little twirl and collect them in bags.
And we will take them back to the lab at Schoodic and separate identifying them.
Every time I get to interact with a scientist, I feel like I've benefited because I'm learning something that I didn't know
ants,
before.
Spiders,
it just
true bugs.
translates to us, which then can translate to our kids when we go outside.
It's a Hymenoptera.
I got one?
Yeah.
So exciting!
You want to do all
Dr.
your...
Donald Chandler, a professor at the University of New Hampshire, demonstrates a passion for biological issues in the park.
That's exciting, we found something!
We bring in all sorts of people. There's people that we consider experts, which I'm typically one. And we bring in lots of people that are fairly unfamiliar with insects but are interested in learning about them. And so you have the opportunity for transferal of knowledge, enthusiasm, teaching about natural history of the group.
I am really into entomology because insects just play such a vital role in our ecosystem, and you don't really think about it until you start studying them.
So the specimens collected in the field come into the lab and do initial sorting right there during the BioBlitz, and then they all get identified, get a catalog number, and then the collections come back here to the park's museum collections.
This is of particular interest to me because Acadia has had a history of documentation of the species, the Proctor list. And so we have sort of a baseline of the species that occurred at that time, which provides a lot of valuable information. We can now look at what's common now and look at what was common and abundant historically. And so perhaps the only national park where we can actually get a sense of change through time. And all of us that are involved in biodiversity are familiar with the fact that the species change through time. The whole question is why? Why are they changing?
I'm still a young teacher. I've only been in the classroom for a couple of years, but I'm noticing that kids are spending less and less time outdoors. And so my goal in coming here is to learn as much as I can about the park so I can get my kids outdoors and get them invested in it.
I do a lot of that stuff with my kids at school, and when we take them outdoors and they can't bring their phones with them and they can't bring their iPads with them and they have to be outside walking in the woods and hiking in the woods, they become so much more curious about their world, and they just have such a great time.
Smiles. They're happier outside.
They are happier outside.
You're right.
Which one? Oh, look! Oh, he's a big one. Oh, he would bite me, I bet.
Studies have shown that time spent in nature can be a source of happiness, including stress reduction, beyond the benefits of education about the natural world. Next, we travel to the popular but technically challenging Precipice Trail, which ascends nearly 1,000 feet through rugged granite cliffs. Beyond its stunning scenic beauty, these cliffs are home to an extraordinary creature, the peregrine falcon, that has made a heartwarming comeback from the brink of extinction due to diligent stewardship efforts. Here we meet Acadia ranger and biologist Bruce Connery, who shares his knowledge and enthusiasm for the science and wonder found in these areas.
So we're at Acadia National Park, and we're at the base of the precipice cliff face, and about this time of year, every year, we go up and band of peregrine falcons. They were once an endangered species, and they're still listed as a threatened species in Maine. And so as one of the management tools, we actually go up and band the chicks, which then gives us a way to track them over the course of their lifetime.
Today's tagging was done by a team of 3 climbers. They carefully navigated their way up these treacherous cliffs to the nest site.
And we have to hit the right window when the chicks are right at the right age. If they get too old, they can actually do things crazy like jump, or if they're too young, the bands won't fit properly on their legs. So you have to try to time it around their 3rd week of life.
Okay, Christian, birds in the back, go ahead.
The team captured and tagged the chicks in less than 1 hour with minimal disruption. obtaining important scientific data.
So this is a female, and this is between 21 and 25 days. So it gives us a way to see how birds move and where they're repopulating and how the structure of the population in New England is working.
Peregrine populations were in steep decline during the mid-20th century due to the impact of environmental contaminants, including pesticides such as DDT. After being listed in 1970 as an endangered species in the United States, peregrine restoration efforts have been remarkably successful. The world population of peregrines is now estimated at more than 100,000. In the mid-1980s, Acadia National Park participated in a cooperative management plan to restore a self-sustaining population of peregrines in the eastern United States. Peregrines have long nested in Acadia, but prior to the restoration program, the last known nesting pair was reported in 1956. From 1984 to 1986, 22 peregrine chicks were placed on a high cliff face over Jordan Pond. By 1991, a mating pair had the first successful nest in 35 years. Since then, more than 80 chicks have been reported in Acadia.
Precipice is really a very special place. It means return of peregrine falcons.
We traveled to Portland, Maine to learn more about peregrines from master carver Floyd Schultz and falconer Peter Spadone as they share their knowledge with a 7th grade class from King Middle School.
So we're going to take his hood off. You hear that hissing? Look at the size of those eyes. There we go. Show him your wings. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. Aren't they spectacular? Yes, I know. Oh. Are there some more questions maybe that I haven't covered? Yes.
What's the fastest they can fly at?
The fastest animals that have ever lived on this planet are this guy right here. In a dive, when they're coming down, they can fly at 200 miles an hour. Compared to these guys, even a cheetah looks like he's moving in slow motion. So any other questions? You want to know a little bit more about these birds? Yes.
How many falcons are left in the wild?
Because we've gotten rid of some of the harmful pesticides that are in the environment, like DDT, peregrines are making quite a comeback, so there are thousands of them now in the wild.
It's definitely a wild animal.
For these future park stewards, Acadia is now more than a beautiful place. It's a home of peregrine falcons, a place to be explored, appreciated, and cared for.
So you calm down.
I'm going to take good care of you, okay?
Because I bet you'd love to have a exact original of a peregrine falcon.
These places are the best outdoor classrooms.
Where we can engage the public in the science, we can demystify the science and really provide transformative experiences.
Acadia helps with science. Every year I went, I learned more about science.
When you're in a classroom, basically you just have paper and they talk about it. But actually get to go see it and learn about it in real life, it's more exciting and more education, actually.
Science informs all of our management decisions about how we take care of and steward the cultural and the natural resources of the park.
When you're on a mountaintop or at the lake at Acadia, it looks beautiful. Everything looks fine. But beneath that, it's a very complex system and it's under a lot of stress.
By engaging people in the science, we can increase that appreciation. Even though the postcards largely look the same, the place is changing, and that change matters.
So that they're not just thinking of Acadia as beautiful views and great hiking trails, but very complex ecosystems that need thought and management going forward to the next century.
And I think each one of you have a part to play in this world of caring about something and giving yourself to a cause that matters.
We're just here as stewards of the land until the next generation takes over, and we have to teach them well. And if we lead by example, then they will notice.
And as we go into the next 100 years of our national park system, the future really depends on everyone being a part of the ecology and the science of these parks.
I think it's magnificent how the people that had the Acadia, how they can put, it's fun to go there, but how they put education while having fun there.
What will the future bring for America's national parks at this dawn of a new century? Perhaps Abraham Lincoln had the right perspective when he said, "The best way to predict the future is to create it."